Did you know that over 45% of Australians will experience mental illness in their lifetime? That's nearly half of us.
I can't sleep. I don't. Everything feels flat and grey. I feel ashamed.
Mental ill health devastates lives and families and costs Australians around $60 billion a year. Research and treatment expenses continue to rise, yet rates of mental illness indicate that we're losing the battle. New approaches are urgently needed to address this immense suffering and cost. Psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy is currently being trialled worldwide and has demonstrated remarkable promise in treating depression, anxiety, addiction and post-traumatic stress disorder, with new trials underway for treatment of dementia and anorexia. The treatment combines a short program of psychotherapy with just a few medicinal doses of psilocybin or MDMA. In the 1950s and 60s, psychedelic treatments had a major impact in psychiatry, and many considered it the next big thing in mental health treatment. But for political reasons, the Nixon administration criminalised the use of psychedelics and effectively stopped all research. That research has finally begun again. With proper clinical support, psychedelic treatments are safe and frequently lead to remission after only a short program, and even where current treatments have failed. Here at Mind Medicine Australia, we believe everyone should have access to the best treatments for mental illness. Subject to forthcoming clinical trial results, we will seek to establish best practice in regulated psychedelic-assisted treatment. Mind Medicine Australia is wholly focused on the clinical application of psychedelic medicines. We're preparing for change by developing therapist training, ethical guidelines, a centre of excellence in psychedelic medicine, educational material and events, and supporting clinical research. We're a small organisation doing big things, and we need your support. Please share this video and visit our website to support us and get involved. Hello, lovely to be with you. So firstly, these medicines, MDMA and psilocybin and the whole class of psychedelic medicines have been around since the beginning of human civilization in all ancient cultures, but including, ancient Greece and Rome, including in South America and Mexico. You can see evidence of their use in much of the archaeology and the writings and so on. And these medicines have been handed down for their healing potential and also for raising consciousness through the ages. In the 50s and 60s, they were used extensively to heal a variety of conditions. Over 50,000 patients were treated with these medicines for depression, anxiety, addictions, relationship therapy, end-of-life stress, and a whole range of other conditions as well. And they were considered the next big thing in psychiatry. And then, unfortunately, in 1970, they were politicized by President Nixon, who basically used these medicines to shut down hippies and blacks from protesting against the anti-war. Well, they were protesting against the war movement, and he wanted to stop that. So he basically had a war on drugs, which made all drugs, though these medicines, but anyway, illegal, except for alcohol and cigarettes, which, in all relative drug harm studies that have been done, alcohol and cigarettes are, by far the most dangerous to self and others. And psilocybin and MDMA, in fact, are considered extremely safe, even with recreational use. Now, Mind Medicine Australia, which is the charity which my husband and I have set up, is focused entirely on medically controlled use of these transformational medicines. And so we're not at all focused on recreational use. But of course, a lot of people do use these medicines underground. Some people just to get high, but many people now intentionally to help heal treatment-resistant conditions of depression, anxiety, addictions, and PTSD and other conditions. I'm the least likely person to have ever got interested in drugs. I was completely disinterested in drugs my entire life. I never had any drugs. I couldn't smoke, so I'm a opera singer, so I didn't ever want to smoke. And so I started, I never even got drunk. I might have an occasional glass of alcohol, but now I don't drink at all. But I never was into alcohol either. I don't even drink coffee. I mean, singing was my way of getting high. And so 4.5 years ago, I came across a blog by Tim Ferriss where he mentioned he was donating $100,000 to Imperial College for trials on psilocybin. I had no idea what psilocybin was, but I clicked on the article by Michael Pollan called The Trip Treatment, and I read through the article and I was just captivated. It was like something like the penny dropped for me. I don't know why, really. Part of it was, I guess, the fact that the patient that was, interviewed in this particular media piece was a Holocaust survivor. So even though we might not know or feel that we have any trauma, most of us are carrying trauma. We're carrying a collective trauma, if not our own family's trauma. And so I said to my husband, I think we should do this treatment. And well, he was also carrying some trauma in that his father had committed suicide when he was 13. And for a young boy, that would have been absolutely devastating. So the other thing that really appealed to me was the fact that I'd never been out of control. As I said, I've never tried any other drugs. I had never got drunk. And so we set about trying to get into the trials at Imperial College, but there were none for healthy participants, and we don't have a diagnosable mental illness. And so we then, started seeking a therapist in the Netherlands where these medicines are legal, and we found, a therapist there, and we undertook a major dose of psilocybin with that therapist in a both a ceremonial and a very safe environment. And suffice to say, it blew us out of the stratosphere, and was such an experience of oneness, connection to everything, self, others, the planet, all the things we read and hear about and more, an experience of such incredible beauty and enormity, really, that it's really hard to describe these experiences, as you would know. And both of us really started to become really obsessed, I think, by, reading every article, watching every video about this. We started to meet some of the leading researchers and psychiatrists and learn more about this, attend some of the events around the world. A year later, we undertook another session, an even higher dose, and it was even more profound. And at that point, we said, well, if this is having this impact on us, our relationships with our families and our colleagues, and just our relationship to the planet, well, this should be available to all people who are suffering. And Peter and I had set up 4 charities before Mind Medicine Australia. So we have worked with people who are very disadvantaged, and we've provided a range of wonderful programs to them, from social inclusion choirs to housing and shelters for women who are experiencing domestic violence, to young children and youth who are experiencing loneliness and social isolation, and older adults, and a whole range of charities that we've been involved with and created over many decades. And we just said, well, actually, what lies at the heart of pretty much all disadvantage is mental illness. And if we could actually cure mental illness, then, a lot of the other needs that people have, of course, they need housing and they need solid relationships and they need work, but they might have a better chance of getting those things if they actually feel more empowered to take charge of their own health and well-being. rather than, for example, taking daily medications or having to see a psychotherapist every day for the rest of their lives, or not a psychotherapist every day, but you know what I mean, that many people who have a mental illness, you know, it feels like a life sentence. So to actually have medicines that, you know, you only need to have a few medicinal doses of, as in the case of these medicines, 2 to 3 doses of these medicines alongside integration with psychotherapy leads to remissions of 60 to 80% in like 120 current and recent trials for both depression and PTSD. And that's against about 20 to 30% remissions from current existing treatments. And this is why MDMA and psilocybin have been granted breakthrough therapy status by the FDA in the US, because they're considered vastly superior to existing treatments. Anyway, yeah, it occurred to us that, you know, how can we make sure that these medicines would become available and affordable to all Australians who are suffering? And that's when we set up Mind Medicine Australia. We launched at the start of last year in 2019, and we've just been going gangbusters ever since. It's been a hell of a lot of work. I mean, you know, this is our 5th charity, and it's a little like having a child, I think, having a charity. You know, so yeah, I've had no children because I've had miscarriages very sadly and so on, and I've had to deal with that in my psychedelic experiences as well. But I have set up 3 charities, so it's sort of like having 3 children. You know, they are with you. If you set up a successful charity, you know, it could be there for a long time. But one of our goals with Mind Medicine Australia is to ensure that these medicines do become an integral part of the medical system, so that if you go to your medical practitioner, they'll offer you this as a first-line choice of treatment alongside, you know, antidepressants, you know, psychotherapy and so on. So what we're really trying to do here is expand the treatment options available to medical practitioners and their patients, because the current system is not working for the majority of patients. Like somewhere between 70 to 80% of patients don't get better. Their illness may be managed, so antidepressants may act as some kind of palliative management of a condition or psychotherapy, but the majority of patients don't go into remission. And you know, if there's other treatments that can work, then we need to run and not walk towards them, and find ways to make them accessible and make sure that they're provided in safe, medically controlled environments, so that people can start to get their lives back and experience, you know, the true beauty and joy of, you know, what our short lives offer us, because it is just a candle in the wind, right? Hmm. Yeah, I mean, so we're not fundamentally a research organisation. So our goal is really, so we have 4 prongs to our strategy. One of them is education and awareness. So we run a lot of events, webinars, screenings. We're planning a major global summit next November in Melbourne. We've set up chapters, over 25 chapters in Australia and New Zealand at a local level, so that people can get up the curve and learn about these medicines, and, you know, work to ensure that these medicines become available in their local communities, community by community, as and when, you know, we are able to make sure these laws get changed that prohibit these substances. The second part of our strategy is a certificate in psychedelic assisted therapies for therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, GPs, physicians, mental health nurses, drug and addiction specialists, social workers, and so on. 2 intakes next year, 1 in January, 1 in July. Both are nearly full. Huge demand for that training. And then we're looking at setting up an Asia Pacific Centre for Emerging Mental Health Therapies in partnership with some universities. And that will be for advanced research and development, looking at novel research particularly. Like, our goal is certainly not to replicate research that's been well proven overseas. We're also looking at the manufacture and growing agribusiness for, these medicines in Australia, rollouts of clinics and so on. And the fourth pillar of our strategy is the rescheduling of these medicines and the ethical and legal frameworks to make sure that they can be used, that people understand their use in medical environments, so that we don't block access to these medicines accidentally, by following recreational laws which are prohibitive, but that there are exemptions for people who need to use these medicines. And we are starting to see some light there, in terms of that a few psychiatrists, quite a few now, have got approvals through the TGA for SASB applications, which is a special access scheme that's provided to psychiatrists and doctors and their patients for, who are treatment resistant, and they've tried multiple treatments for the patient, and the patient's in danger. And so these treatments are being applied for, and the TGA is providing approvals. But at the moment, we have a few impediments in some states' laws that prevent the medicines then coming into those states to treat the patient. But in some states, it's okay, like Victoria's okay, but New South Wales is not, for example. A federated system, the joy of it. Yes. Mm-hmm. That's correct. So we have a psych services practice which is run by Dr. Alana Roy, who's a clinical psychologist, and she has a team of practitioners all around Australia who provide support for a variety of reasons. One, for patients who are seeking, these sorts of treatments and need, urgent access to them. Two, for patients who are actually using the medicines. So whilst we don't advocate for underground use, there are many people who are desperate and are using these medicines, and normal doctors in general don't have the experience to know how to integrate and help the patients to integrate that experience. So we have a team of practitioners who do help people to integrate the experiences that they're having. And it's a really good service. Just launched a few months ago. So we encourage people to reach out to us in any number of ways. We're philanthropists. So, whilst we're donating our time and our money to this, we can't do it alone. This is really about a collective movement forwards. Absolutely. Totally. I mean, yeah, you could, it's never been more important for us to have access to expanded treatments. And really, the current system is not capable of managing, it wasn't capable of managing before the bushfires or before COVID, because, only a small percentage of people were getting well. So it doesn't really matter how many patient access gateways you put in. It doesn't matter how much telehealth you provide. If you can't actually help a patient get better, they get either stuck in the system and never get better, or they drop out and then either they'll try something which might or might not work. They might go underground, or worse, spiral down the slippery slope of severe mental illness. And that's really sad to see. And it made me start thinking about how much of the trauma of my parents and grandparents as survivors was I carrying. Every day, we get a multitude of letters, emails, calls, text messages from people, and the suffering is really immense. I mean, with the recent rescheduling applications we did for MDMA and psilocybin to move them from prohibited substances to medically controlled substances, whilst all the applications went to the TGA, a lot were sent to us as well. And I literally, myself and my staff, were in tears over many of the letters, because when you see the decades of trying that people have, tried and failed with multiple different treatments, And you can actually see that in many cases, what has been recommended to them has actually made them worse, and pain for people that, yeah, it's devastating. So we all we need to come together um, to bring these medicines forwards, and we need to really move past the stigma. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of stigma around these medicines. Like even when I first did this, I was afraid because I'd never been out of control, but also I thought, am I going to lose my mind? Am I going to have a heart attack? What's going to happen? You know, even though I'd read all the literature, I was still a bit afraid. But then I realized just how safe and beautiful and loving and this experience was. And I mean, I just can't imagine my life if I hadn't have had this experience. I mean, my life has never been the same since, but not in a bad way. I can assure everyone I didn't have any brain damage. It's just increased. I look at your backdrop and I see all those lovely connected pathways there. And you know, I don't look at a plant or a flower or a raindrop or another human being the same as I used to. It's like, you know, there's part of me in everyone, and everyone's in part of me. You know, it's just spectacular to see the magnificent beauty um, that that we're fortunate enough to experience. And I just wish that everyone could have access to this. Yeah, that's right. It is a big job. Absolutely. Which is a really important part of the process. You know, there's 3 steps to this process, and it's important to say that. You know, the first step is the actual screening to make sure that, you know, you are a suitable candidate for this sort of treatment, and getting to know your therapist and just walking through the steps of what the medicinal session will involve. And once you've gone through that, it's, you know, you feel much more safe and comfortable. And then there's the medicinal sessions themselves, which of course are extraordinary um, and can be confronting, but you know, that's where the healing happens. You know, there's a famous saying, you know, whatever's in the way is the way. So you just have to go through and then you find the way. And then the third, you know, part of that, and the most important part of all of this therapy, as I mentioned, is the integration. How can you bring back this incredibly meaningful experience into your life, your work, your family, so that you can make the changes needed to lead a positive and productive and meaningful life? Yeah, yeah. No, that'd be good. I'd welcome that, and please send me a link to this, and we'll share this as well. Thank you. Thanks for your support. We really appreciate it.